Who buys a damn billboard to ruin a wedding? That was the question whispered through every guest's lips as they shuffled into the glossy, white tent. Careful not to look too long at the neon glare across the street, yet how could they not? There it stood, tall, merciless, and impossible to ignore, a 30-foot monument, screaming the truth they all pretended not to know. Asterisk, the bride and groom are scammers. Asterisk, beneath the bold letters was a collage of screenshots, bank transfers, fake envois, and text messages where their so-called fundraiser for charity money mysteriously became down payments on a designer honeymoon. And just like that, their perfect day had been hijacked. Not by an ex, not by a jealous rival, but by me, the person they had unceremoniously, uninvited, only weeks before. It hadn't always been this way. Once upon a time, I thought Melissa was my closest friend. We met during our first year of college. Two broke kids with mismatched roommates and an insatiable craving for greasy diner pancakes at 2 a.m. She was magnetic. The kind of person who filled a room simply by walking into it. I was quieter, more grounded, the one with secrets. Maybe that's why she clung to me. By the time graduation rolled around, she had woven herself so tightly into my life that it felt like she was family. So when she announced her engagement, Greg, the slick real estate entrepreneur, who never see a perennial, cried else, but deep doing something my stomach. His handshake was too smooth, his charm rehearsed. Melissa was starry-eyed, though, and what could I do? You just don't know him like I do, she insisted one night over wine, brushing away my doubts. He's brilliant. He's going to make us both so happy. I wanted to believe her. For her sake, I tried. The first cracks appeared during the wedding planning. Melissa and Greg weren't exactly flush with cash. Melissa worked part-time at a boutique. Greg was forever chasing some vague deal, but suddenly they were asking everyone to contribute to a charity fundraiser in lieu of wedding gifts. The cause? A children's hospital in need of equipment. Their story was touching, noble even, and people opened their wallets without hesitation. I donated too, though a little voice inside me whispered unease. It wasn't until I saw the receipts that everything snapped into focus. One Friday night, Melissa asked me to help with decorations. While she was in the shower, her laptop pinged with an email. I glanced at the screen, intending only to close it, but froze. The subject line read, confirmation of payment, Fiji honeymoon, resort. Asterisk, my chest tightened as I scrolled. The amount. Identical to what they'd raised that month for the kids. My mouth went dry. I kept scrolling. Attached were invoices, all labeled under the charity account, and yet every cent funneled toward their honeymoon, suite, private chef, and spa services. When Melissa came out, towel in her hair, humming, I slammed the laptop shut so hard she jumped. What was that? She asked, eyes narrowing. You tell me, I shot back, my voice trembling. Since when does charity money pay for ocean view bungalows? Her face paled thénardinet. You understand? It's complicated. No, I snapped, standing so fast the chair screeched. It's simple. It's theft. We argued until our throats were raw. She begged me to let it go, to trust her. It's just borrowing, she said. We'll replace it after the wedding. No one will ever know. But I knew, and once you know, you can't unknow. I didn't speak to her for weeks after that, torn between loyalty and fury. Then the wedding invitation arrived engraved, ostentatious, as if nothing had happened. I stared at it for hours before shoving it into a drawer. 2 weeks later, another envelope came, smaller, colder. Inside was a simple card. Asterisk, we regret to inform you that due to venue restrictions, we can no longer accommodate you at our wedding. Thank you for your understanding. Asterisk understanding. They had the audacity to uninvite me, the one person who could expose them and dress it up as logistics. My hands shook as I crumpled the card. That was the night my anger crystallized into resolve. If they thought they could silence me, they were dead wrong. I didn't scream. I didn't beg for re-entry. I got to work. First, I gathered everything, screenshot shots of the charity page, the fake invoices, the email confirmations. Even the texts Melissa had sent me bragging about how easy it was to convince people to donate. Piece by piece, I built a file thick enough to crush any pretense of innocence. Next came the question, how to reveal it, a Facebook post. Too easy to delete an email to the guests. Too ignorable. No, I needed something permanent, undeniable, and impossible to look away from. That's when I noticed the empty billboard, spaced right across the street from their chosen venue. Fate had handed me the perfect weapon. When I called the advertising company, the man on the line chuckled at my request. "A wedding expose," he said. "That's a first. Can you do it or not?" I demanded. He whistled low. "Oh, we can do it." Cash up front. I paid. And 2 days before the wedding, the billboard went up. The morning of, I parked my car a block away, sipping coffee and watching as guests arrived. Some laughed nervously, some gasped, some snapped pictures with their phones. Greg stormed outside, face crimson, yelling into his phone. Melissa followed, mascara already streaking, screaming at him to fix it, but there was no fixing it. The truth was 10 feet tall and glowing. And me, I leaned back in my seat, heart pounding, finally breathing for the first time in weeks. This wasn't revenge for being uninvited. It was justice for every dollar stolen, every lie told, every friend manipulated. Of course, the story didn't end with the billboard. Not even close. By the time the ceremony was supposed to begin, the air outside the venue was thick with whispers and side eyes. Guests clutched their programs like shields, murmuring to one another as though their voices could somehow disappear under the hum of traffic. Nobody was looking at the flower arrangements, the imported champagne, or the towering 3-tier cake inside. Everyone was staring at that billboard. Greg tried to bluff his way through. He climbed onto a chair in front of the tent, waving his arms. "This is slander." He barked. "Some jealous freak with too much money on their hands is trying to ruin the happiest day of our lives. Don't believe it." But the billboard didn't shout back. It just kept glowing, steady, undeniable. Screenshots of his own emails stared down at him. The guests didn't cheer or clap. They shuffled their feet, exchanged uneasy glances, and one by one began pulling out their phones. Melissa, ever the actress, attempted to regain control. She grabbed the mic meant for the efficient, her voice shaking but loud. "Everyone, please, don't be distracted by lies. Greg and I have done nothing wrong. This is an attack, a disgusting stunt." "From the buck," someone shouted. "Then wive your Venmo? Handle on it." The room erupted into nervous laughter. Melissa froze. Greg swore under his breath, tugging her toward the side of the stage, but she yanked her arm free. That was their first public crack, the perfect couple, unraveling before their own guests. Inside, I lingered just beyond the entrance, blending with the crowd. I hadn't planned to show up. I was content to let the billboard do the talking. But when the text started pouring into my phone, asterisk, you won't believe what is happening here, asterisk. Asterisk, did you do this? Asterisk, asterisk, you need to come now, asterisk, I couldn't resist. I slipped past the valet and into the tent, heart hammering, a strange cocktail of adrenaline and dread sloshing through me. "Holy crap," whispered Jenna, another college friend, grabbing my arm the moment she saw me. "Was this you?" Her eyes flicked toward the street. I didn't answer. My silence was enough. Before I knew it, Melissa spotted me. Her face twisted, venomous. "You," she spat into the mic, pointing directly at me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "You couldn't stand to see me happy, could you? You've always been jealous, always bitter. And now you've ruined my wedding." The crowd turned, eyes narrowing, some shocked, some curious. Heat climbed up my neck, but I didn't flinch, not anymore. "You ruined it yourself," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. "You stole from people who trusted you, from family, from friends, from strangers who thought they were giving to sick kids. And you used it for a honeymoon." Gasps again, sharper this time. A man in the third row muttered, "I donated to that fundraiser." Melissa's lips trembled, but she tried to recover. "That's not true. None of it." "She's twisting things. I have proof." I pulled out my phone and tapped the folder I'd created. Emails, invoices, texts. "Want to see the receipt for the exact resort you booked in Fiji?" The guests swarmed like sharks scenting blood. Phones hovered in the air, screens recording. The officiant stepped back, clearly unwilling to referee this mess. Greg lunged forward, grabbing the mic. "Everyone, shut the hell up. None of this matters. We're getting married. End of story. Sit down." But no one sat down. Instead, A woman in a floral dress stood. My mother donated $500. You told her it was for a new wing in the children's ward. She lives on a fixed income. Do you have any idea what that meant to her? Greg's jaw tightened. Lady, I don't care about your... The slap of her hand against his cheek cut the sentence in half. The entire tent went silent, then erupted in a collective gasp. Greg staggered back, eyes wide. Melissa broke then. Her composure shattered, tears streaking through her makeup. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she whispered into the mic, forgetting to turn it off. We just needed the money. Just until Greg's deal came through. The admission hung in the air like smoke. No one missed it. Phones kept recording. Guests kept murmuring. Somewhere in the back, a man laughed bitterly. Guess I know what headline tomorrow's paper will have. Melissa's knees buckled. And for a brief, I remember that hospitality to use the front. I remembered the smug smile she gave me when I confronted her weeks ago, telling me no one would ever find out. Zepitidje. I turned and walked out, letting the chaos swallow them whole. Behind me, the tent buzzed with shouting, the sound of chairs scraping, guests storming toward the exits. The wedding was over before it began, but my fight with Melissa and Greg, that was only the beginning. The first day in court was only supposed to be about preliminary arguments, but it felt like the opening act of a drama everyone secretly hoped would turn scandalous. Melissa sat at the plaintiff's table, draped in a pale blue dress that seemed chosen to make her look innocent, delicate. Gregging like the Alwebin. Taloye, a slick smegno voiced painting me as the villain. Your Honor, he began, oozing confidence, this is a clear case of malicious defamation. My clients have been slandered in public, humiliated on social media, and subjected to harassment all because of the reckless actions of one disgruntled former friend. He pointed directly at me, his finger shaking theatrically. She orchestrated a billboard, yes. A literal billboard broadcasting false accusations on the most important day of their lives. The judge raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Then it was my lawyer's turn. He didn't posture. He didn't raise his voice. He simply placed a thick folder on the desk with a heavy asterisk thunk asterisk. With all due respect, Your Honor, we will prove that not only were the statements true, but that the plaintiffs knowingly committed fraud. What my client revealed was not defamation. It was fact. He slid the first set of documents toward the judge. Copies of the honeymoon, invoice, screenshots of Melissa's texts, bank transfers. The judge flipped through them, his expression tightening with each page. And you're certain these are authentic? He asked. Absolutely, my lawyer said. And there's more. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Greg's smirk faltered. That was only the beginning. Over the next week, the trial became a spectacle. Every day, new evidence surfaced. One morning, it was proof of additional donations that had gone directly to Greg's personal account. Un notaire. It was testimony from a travel agent who confirmed that Melissa herself had booked the honeymoon package using funds labeled as a charity contribution. The courtroom was packed, reporters filling the benches, sketch artists scribbling furiously. The words asterisk charity, scam asterisk were whispered like a curse. Melissa broke first. On the third day, during cross-examination, she cracked under pressure. Did you or did you not tell donors the money was for medical equipment? My lawyer pressed. Her hands twisted in her lap. We intended to replace it. We weren't going to keep it, so you admit you diverted the money? Her lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Gasps echoed through the room. Greg tried to hold the line. He barked. He sneered. He insisted it was all business, just a loan, from the donations to cover wedding costs until his big deal closed. But the more he spoke, the worse he sounded like a con man caught in his own script. And then Tensan coming. Halfway through the proceedings, a subpoena unearthed records from one of Greg's shell companies. Buried in the transactions was a payment, not for a honeymoon, not for flowers or champagne, but for an asterisk down payment on a luxury car. Asterisk Melissa's head whipped toward him, in shock when the papers were shown. You told me it was for us. She hissed, her voice caught by a microphone. The courtroom buzzed like a kicked beehive. Greg glared at her. Shut up, he muttered through clenched teeth. The judge slammed his gavel. Henug. But it wasn't enough. Because that revelation cracked their alliance wide open. Melissa's next testimony was dripping with bitterness. She painted Greg as the mastermind, the manipulator. He pressured me, she cried. I didn't want to do it, but he said it was the only way. Elle promisait de disbarred, Greg exploded. Whole time, don't you dare pin this on me. Their lawyer's face drained of color as his clients imploded in front of the entire courtroom. I just sat back, silent, watching them devour each other. By the end of that day, the judge looked exhausted. This is no longer a defamation case, he said, rubbing his temples. What I see here are serious allegations of fraud, embezzlement, and misrepresentation. I will be recommending further criminal investigation. The gavel struck. And just like that, the people who once uninvited me from their wedding were now staring down the possibility of prison. But the true storm hadn't hit yet. That came when the investigators dug deeper and uncovered scams that stretched far beyond the wedding fundraiser. Melissa and Greg hadn't just conned their friends. They had conned dozens of people. And soon, everyone wanted their pound of flesh. The investigators worked faster than anyone expected, almost as if they were eager to make an example of Melissa and Greg. Within weeks, subpoenas and search warrants began to fly. Their bank accounts were combed, their emails dissected, their shell companies pried open like rotten fruit. And what poured out was worse than anything I had imagined. Turns out, the charity scam was just one branch of a tree riddled with rot. Greg had been running small cons for years, phony real estate investments. Consulting, fees for deals that never existed, inflated invoices billed to clueless acquaintances. Melissa had been his perfect partner, charming people into handing over money with a smile and a sob story. Together, they had scammed at least 40 different people out of nearly $500,000. The news broke like wildfire. Every outlet that had covered the Billboard picked up the updates. This time with sharper headlines. Asterisk wedding, scammers face federal investigation, asterisk and asterisk from bride and groom to con artists. Asterisk their faces were everywhere on TV, in newspapers, plastered across blogs and gossip sites. They couldn't hide. And yet, unbelievably, they tried. One night, my phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Please, Melissa's voice whispered. I could hear cars rushing by in the background. You have to help me. I almost laughed. Help you? After everything you've done, it was Greg, she pleaded, her tone shaking. He made me do it. He threatened to leave me if I didn't play along. I didn't know it would get this bad. Melissa, I said coldly, you were smiling in those texts while you bragged about it. Don't rewrite history now. Her breath hitched. If they arrest me, I'll lose everything. You already did, I said, and hung up. 2 days later, the arrests came. Greg was picked up outside a bar, stumbling drunk, cursing at the officers as they shoved him into the back of a cruiser. Melissa was taken quietly from her parents' house. Air face pâle, hair disheveled, a far cry from the glamorous bride she'd once been. The internet devoured every second. Videos of the arrests circulated with glee. Memes popped up overnight, Melissa's tear-streaked face photoshopped onto scammer ads. Greg's mugshot paired with captions like asterisk your investment is safe with me, asterisk for once, the internet's cruelty felt. Deserved. But while the world laughed, I was still tangled in the mess. I'd been subpoenaed as a witness, required to testify before the grand jury. I spent hours with investigators, handing over every file, every screenshot, every scrap of evidence I'd collected. They thanked me, called me instrumental, but I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach. Because this wasn't just about Melissa and Greg anymore. This was about every person they'd bled dry. The woman in the floral dress, her mother, dozens of strangers who had believed in a fake cause. People whose faith in generosity had been shattered. When I finally took the stand, I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I simply told the truth about the laptop. The confrontation. The uninvitation. The billboard. And as I spoke, I saw Melissa staring at me from across the courtroom. Her eyes red but sharp, like knives she wished she could throw. Greg, meanwhile, didn't even look at me. He just slouched in his chair, smirking faintly, as if this were all still a game. But it wasn't a game anymore. The grand jury indicted them both on multiple counts of wire, fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Bail was set sky high. Their assets were frozen. The lavish honeymoon they'd once dreamed of was reduced to a few crumpled brochures sitting in an evidence file. The world moved on quickly onto the next scandal, the next viral story. But for me, it lingered. One night, as I drove past the empty lot across from their wedding venue, I slowed down. The billboard was gone now, replaced with an ad for a car dealership. The glow of it felt hollow, almost disappointing. And yet, I couldn't help but smile. That billboard had been the spark. The fire, though, that was still burning. Because Melissa and Greg weren't just headed for prison, they were headed for a reckoning. And I wasn't sure either of them was strong enough to survive it. The trial itself was like something out of a television drama, except every second was real. Courtrooms are usually dull, bogged down emotions and jargon, but this one was electric. The gallery was full every day, reporters scribbling notes, former donors glaring from the benches, curious onlookers eager to witness the slow unraveling of a golden couple turned criminals. The prosecution didn't hold back. They laid out the schemes piece by piece, methodically, like a surgeon peeling back layers of flesh to expose the rot beneath. Wire transfers with false descriptions. Fake invoices labeled Children's Oncology Fund, but deposited into Greg's personal account. Testimonies from victims who had believed the lies, elderly, retirees, working-class parents, even a teacher who had organized a school fundraiser only to discover her students. Pennies and dimes had gone to pay for Greg S. Rolex. Every testimony was another knife. Melissa wept through most of it, clutching tissues as if tears could wash away guilt. Sometimes she leaned into her lawyer, whispering frantically. Sometimes she turned her glare on Greg, as though she could shove the blame across the table with sheer force of will. Greg, he barely flinched. He wore the same smirk, the same casual shrug, as if he were still convinced he'd walk away unscathed. When the prosecutor displayed photos of the luxury car he'd bought with donor money, he leaned back and muttered loud enough for the jury to hear. "It's a nice car," though the jury's faces hardened instantly. And then came the moment that changed everything. Melissa Rangus fight at expected, but maybe chap. Their alliance had been crumbling since the car revelation, and Melissa was nothing if not a survivor. When she took the stand, her voice shook, but her words were clear. Greg told me people would never notice. He said everyone exaggerates charity expenses. He made me believe it was normal. That we'd pay it back after his deal's closed. I didn't want to, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. It was a desperate attempt at self-preservation, painting herself as coerced, manipulated. The defense pounced on it, of course, hammering her contradictions, her complicity. But the damage to Greg was brutal. To hear his own bride turn against him in front of the jury was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. The trial dragged for weeks, but by the time closing arguments came, the air was thick with inevitability. The jury deliberated less than a day. Guilty, they said, voice after voice, on nearly every count. Wire fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, money laundering. Greg's smirk finally vanished. Melissa sobbed openly, mascara streaking down her cheeks as the judge set a date for sentencing. When it was over, I walked out into the blinding sunlight, the courthouse steps crowded, with reporters shouting my name, cameras flashing like lightning. "Do you feel vindicated?" one called. "Do you regret putting up the billboard?" asked another. I paused, my hand on the railing. For a moment, I thought of the night I saw that honeymoon invoice glowing on Melissa's laptop. Of the moment I realized my best friend had turned into a stranger wearing her face. Of the invitation rescinded with a smug little card. And of the billboard itself lit up across from the tent, truth glowing, so brightly no one could ignore it. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I don't regret it." Not one bit. The cameras clicked, the reporters shouted more questions, but I was already moving, already done with them. But the story wheat month though, because a month later, just before sentencing, Melissa wrote me a letter from jail. And inside that letter was a secret she'd never dared to speak in court. A secret that would drag me back into their world one last time. The envelope arrived without a return address, just my name scrawled in shaky handwriting I recognized instantly. Melissa, for a moment. I considered tossing it straight into the trash. I'd spent months untangling myself from her lies, standing in court, reliving every betrayal. Why would I give her one more chance to infect my life? But Kring Premier Torito pens. The letter inside was long, cramped, written on thin yellow paper from the county jail. Asterisk, I know you hate me. Asterisk, it began. Asterisk, you have every reason to, but before the sentencing, I need you to know something. Greg isn't who you think he is. He wasn't just scamming people for money. He was working with others. Dangerous people. People I can't name in court without putting myself at risk. If I talk, I won't live long enough to serve my sentence. If I stay quiet, I'll go down for things that weren't all mine. Asterisk, I stopped, heart pounding, rereading the lines. This wasn't the desperate whining of someone begging for sympathy. It felt like fear. Real, raw fear. Asterisk, the Billboard saved me more than you know. Asterisk, she wrote further down. Asterisk, you exposed the wedding scam. Yes. But you also shined a light on things much bigger. I don't think you realize what you stepped into. Watch yourself. They'll know you're the one to this. Asterisk, azabatom her henraisi. Hurried. Asterisk, if anything happens to me, the file is in my apartment. Behind the dresser, you'll know what to do. Asterisk, no signature. Just that. I sat at my kitchen table long after the letter slid from my fingers, staring into nothing. A chill had spread through me, settling deep in my chest. Was this another manipulation? A last-ditch attempt to drag me back into her chaos? Or was Melissa telling the truth for once in her life? Dangerous people. Bigger than Greg. I told myself not to care. To let the system chew her up and spit her out. To let Greg rot. They deserved each other. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about it. 2 days later, I found myself outside Melissa's old apartment. The building manager gave me a long look when I explained I was there to collect some of her belongings. Money changed hands. Keys jingled into my palm. Her unit smelled like dust and perfume. The remnants of a life left behind. Half-empty bottles of makeup, unopened bills, clothes tossed across a chair. I nearly turned back, telling myself it was a wild goose chase. Then I remembered her exact words. Asterisk behind the dresser. Asterisk, the dresser was heavy, solid oak, but I shoved until it scraped against the wall. My breath caught. There, taped to the back, was a thick manila envelope. Inside, not just receipts or texts. Bank ledgers, names, offshore accounts. Transfers far larger than anything tied to the wedding scam. And among those names, one leapt out, a name I recognized. Someone we both knew. Someone very close. The realization hit like ice water. Melissa had been right. Greg wasn't working alone. And by board with that billboard, on Tatwanti finished me yet. I stared at that name until the letters blurred. My stomach churned, a cold sweat running down my back. This wasn't some stranger from a news article. This was someone I'd shared meals with, laughed with, trusted. Someone who had been at the wedding. Someone who had hugged me when the billboard went up and whispered, asterisk, good for you. Asterisk, I sank to the floor, the envelope trembling in my hands. Melissa hadn't been bluffing. I flipped through the documents again, my fingers shaking as I scanned the transfers. There were multiple accounts, all linked through dummy corporations registered in far-off islands. Greg was just a middleman. Melissa had been the pretty face. But the big money was flowing to someone else entirely. And now I had proof. I wanted to call my lawyer, the investigators, anyone, but I hesitated. If what Melissa wrote was true, whoever this person was had eyes everywhere. Tipping off the wrong person could get me silenced before I even opened my mouth. I packed the files into my backpack, heart hammering, and shoved the dresser back into place. The hallway outside Melissa's apartment felt unnaturally quiet, too quiet. My ears rang with the sound of my own pulse. I locked the door, slipped the keys back under the mat, and walked quickly down the stairs. That's when I saw him. A man leaning against a black SUV at the far end of the parking lot. Sunglasses, hands in his pockets, posture casual but coiled. He was staring right at me. I froze for a fraction of a second, then forced myself to keep walking as though nothing was wrong. My grip on the backpack tightened. He didn't move. Just watched me pass. When I reached my car, my hands were trembling so badly I dropped the keys twice. By the time I slid behind the wheel and locked the doors, my breath was shallow, my heart jackhammering. In the rearview mirror, the man's head tilted slightly, like he was memorizing my face. Then he got into the SUV and drove off without a sound. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he'd been. Melissa's warning echoed in my head. Asterisk watch yourself. They'll know you're the one who started this. The billboard had been my act of justice, my line in the sand, but it had also made me visible. And now, it seemed, visible was dangerous. That night, I spread the documents across my kitchen table, scanning them line by line. Offshore accounts, shell companies, transfers disguised as donations. Untouchable brand. I couldn't keep this to myself, but I also couldn't trust just anyone. So I did something I hadn't done since this all began. I called a reporter. Not one of the gossip-chasing ones who'd swarmed the courthouse, but an investigative journalist I'd met years ago through work, someone who had exposed crooked city officials and survived the fallout. When she picked up, her voice was wary but curious. I need to show you something, I said. Something big. Bigger than the wedding scam. Bigger how? Premier hésitated. The kind of big that gets people killed. There was a pause on the line. Then, steady, bring it to me. Tonight, I hung up, shoved the papers back into the envelope, and grabbed my coat. As I left my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me again. Somewhere out there, the people Greg worked for, the ones Melissa feared already, knew I'd opened the envelope. And they wouldn't wait forever before making their move. I left my building just as dusk started to settle, the city washed in amber light. The envelope felt heavier than paper should feel, as if it carried not just documents but the weight of choices I couldn't take back. Every step down the stairwell echoed to loud, each shadow stretching long. The journalist, her name, was Carolyn, texted me an address instead of her usual newsroom. A quiet coffee shop on the edge of downtown. Back table, far corner, she wrote. Less traffic. I didn't like that she was thinking about traffic either. I drove a different route than usual, doubling back twice, checking my mirrors. Nothing obvious behind me, but I couldn't shake the memory of the man at the SUV. My heart kept hammering, my fingers gripping the steering wheel tight enough to ache. The coffee shop was small, warm, crowded with the hum of espresso machines and soft music. Carolyn sat where she said she would, hair tucked under a beanie, her laptop already open but screen dimmed. When she saw me, she closed it and pushed her cup aside. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said quietly. I slid into the booth. I placed the envelope on the table between us. She reached for it, but I stopped her hand. Before you open it, you need to know. If you take this on, you'll be a target too. These aren't just scammers. This is organized money. Her eyes flicked up, sharp and serious. That's the only kind worth exposing. She opened the envelope. For the next hour, we went through everything, every ledger, every offshore account, every name. She didn't speak much, just scribbled notes, her brow furrowing deeper with each page. By the time she reached the last transfer, her hands were trembling. Jesus, she whispered. This isn't a wedding scam. This is laundering. Political donations. Property flips. They've been moving money for years, and you see that name. I asked, my throat tight. She nodded. Yeah, and if it's who I think it is. She trailed off, biting her lip. We'll need to be very careful. I leaned back, scanning the coffee shop. I think they're already watching me. I saw someone at Melissa's place. He followed me out. Caroline's face went still. Okay, she said finally. Here's what we do. I make copies tonight, securely. I pass them to other journalists I trust in case something happens to me. And you. She hesitated. You disappear for a while. Go stay with someone. No patterns, no social media. You can't be predictable. I wanted to protest, to insist I wasn't scared, but my voice cracked. Melissa warned me. Sighed, if she talked, she wouldn't live long enough to serve her sentence. Carolyn closed the envelope carefully. If they're moving this kind of money, she's not wrong. We left separately, agreeing on a burner phone and a single code word if things went bad. My breath misted in the cold air as I walked back to my car. The street was mostly empty, but a black SUV rolled slowly past the corner. Different driver, same sunglasses. I got in the car and locked the doors. As Dee drove off, the lights brown, mi racine, the board hike of lightning. The trial had been a storm. But this was an entire hurricane waiting to swallow everything. And somewhere, sitting in a jail cell, Melissa knew I had opened that envelope. She knew exactly what was coming next. And so did they. Carolyn S. warning rattled in my skull the whole drive home. Asterisk disappear for a while. No patterns. Asterisk every light in my apartment felt like a beacon. Every shadow seemed to dark. I moved from window to window, lowering blinds, checking the street below. No SUV. Not yet. I tossed essentials into a duffel bag, laptop, cash, a couple changes of clothes, the burner phone we'd agreed on. Before I zipped it shut, I tucked the envelope inside a folder marked with a fake label. If someone broke in while I was gone, all they'd find was some old tax returns and a stack of junk mail. Melissa's letter stayed on my counter, the edges curling. I read the last lines again. Asterisk if anything happens to me, the file is in my apartment. You'll know what to do. Asterisk I had done what she asked. Now the question was what to do next. By midnight, I was on a bus heading 3 cities over. My hood pulled low. No car, no credit cards, no phone except the burner. Just me, the bag, and the uneasy weight of knowing I'd crossed a line you couldn't uncross. Carolyn texted on the burner at 1:17 a.m. Greater than asterisk files copied, distributed to 2 others. Safe for now. Stay dark. We'll call with updates. For the first time in days, I exhaled. At least there's something do it, mer. 2 days passed like a fever dream. I stayed in a cheap motel under a false name, eating takeout, watching muted news channels from the bed. Greg and Melissa's sentencing date was set, 6 weeks from now. Reporters speculated that Melissa might get leniency for testifying. Greg's lawyers were already filing appeals. On the day, Zakalkam. Caroline's voice was a whisper through static. They know, she said. My heart lurched. What do you mean? They know. They broke into my apartment, she said. Didn't take anything, just rifled through everything. Left my laptop open on a blank screen. A warning. I gripped the phone tighter. Did they get the files? No, she said. But they wanted me to know they could. A chill ran down my spine. What do we do? I'm going to publish, she said. All of it. Today. Once it's public, they can't kill it. The only power they have is silence. They'll come after you, I said. They already are, she replied. There was a pause. You should know something else, she said, her voice low. Melissa asked for you at the jail. Ove en dove. She says she has information that could blow this open even more. Names, locations. She wants to trade it for protection, but she only talked to you. I went cold. Me? She says she trusts you, Carolyn said. And she's scared. Really scared. I stared at the motel's peeling wallpaper, the burner, phone hot against my ear. Melissa, the woman who had conned me, betrayed me, dragged me into this, now wanted me to be her lifeline. Caroline's voice broke the silence. If you're willing to go see her, I can arrange it. But it has to be quiet, no paper trail. If these people find out, she's talking. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. My pulse thundered in my ears. The Billboard had started as revenge. Then it became justice. Now, it was survival, not just for me, but maybe for Melissa too. I'll go, I heard myself say. Then pack again, Carolyn whispered. We move tonight. I hung up and sat in the dark, the duffel bag at my feet, knowing that the next time I saw Melissa would not be as friends. Or enemies, but as to people holding pieces of a bomb too big for either of us to defuse alone. And somewhere beyond the motel walls, the men in the SUV were already circling. Carolyn moved like someone who had done this before. We met at a gas station off the interstate, the kind of place where everything smelled of burnt coffee and no one looked twice at strangers. She'd traded her beanie for a ball cap and sunglasses, and her old Subaru was dusty enough to blend into the background. She didn't speak until we were back on the road, headlights cutting through the black ribbon of highway. You don't talk, you don't touch your phone. When we stop, you're no one, she said, her eyes fixed ahead. We're ghosts until we're inside that jail. I nodded, clutching the duffel bag on my lap, my pulse beat a fast tattoo in my throat. Does she know we're coming? Carolyn shook her head. She knows you might come. I didn't give her a date or time. Trop risky. For 3 hours, we drove. No radio, no chatter, just the hum of tires and the occasional glare of a passing truck. Retire mirror, my stomachstein, atin the exile. Just before dawn, we reached the county jail a grim, low-slung building behind double fences. Caroline parked behind a row of transport vans. They'll let you in as a friend visit, she said. 15 minutes. No phone, no bag. If she gives you something, you pass it to me in the bathroom after. Understand? I swallowed hard. Understand. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A guard frisked me without much interest, then pointed me toward a small interview room with a metal table bolted to the floor. She be in soon, he said, and left. I sat, palms pressed flat against the table, to hide their shaking. The door opened. Melissa shuffled, in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her wrists free, but her ankles shackled. She looked smaller, like someone who had been folded in on herself. Her hair was dull, her eyes ringed with purple shadows. But when she saw me, something flickered their relief, desperation, and an echo of the old Melissa I'd once known. You came, she breathed, sitting opposite me. Her voice cracked on the second word. I came, I said evenly. Caroline said you had something. Melissa glanced toward the door, then leaned forward. They're going to kill me, she whispered. If I talk in court, I'm dead. If I don't, I take the fall for everything. Greg was just a cog. The real players are still out there. I didn't move. Names, I said quietly. She blinked rapidly, tears welling. I wrote them down. Accounts, places, proof. It's hidden. Where? Melissa's eyes darted to the corner of the ceiling. They're watching, even in here. Where? Melissa. I pressed. Her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. Locker 317 Union Station. Key taped under the third rail of the maintenance stairwell. My breath caught. And what's inside? Everything, she said. Enough to bring them all down. But if they know you have it, you'll be dead before you open it. We stared at each other across the cold metal table. The hum of the fluorescent, lights louder than my heartbeat. You ruined my life, she said softly. But you also might be the only one who can save it. The guard's voice echoed from the hall. Time. Melissa's eyes locked on mine. Get it before they do. Please. The door opened, and the guard motioned for her. She stood, shackles clinking, her gaze still fixed on me like a lifeline slipping from her grasp. As she disappeared through the door, my hands finally began to shake. Caroline was waiting in the bathroom, as planned. I washed my hands under the harsh water, then leaned close enough for her to hear. Union Station, I whispered. Locker 317 Kilometer ist weit. Jésus. We walked out of the jail separately, but I could feel it, the invisible circle tightening. The SUV men, somewhere out there, maybe already guessing where we'd go next. The Billboard had exposed a scam. The trial had cracked a conspiracy. But now, with that locker waiting in a train station somewhere, I was holding the thread of something even darker. And if I pulled Dingravel, Caroline into the Dreisel, she cut across 3 counties, winding down unlit service roads until we were so far from anything familiar that the horizon looked like a smear of ink. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and clipped. Union Station Essen-Elens. Cameras everywhere, plainclothes transit cops, and who knows how many of their people watching. We'll need a plan before we even get close to that locker. I stared out the window, my knuckles white around the duffel bag. You think they're already there? She gave a humorless laugh. If Melissa left something in that locker, they know. They probably don't know exactly where yet. But the second you show up looking for it, you're a target. Then how do we get it? She glanced at me. We don't rush in. We scout first. You're invisible, remember? No patterns, no mistakes. We stopped at a truck stop an hour outside the city. Caroline used a payphone and actual payphone to call someone she trusted but refused to name. After a short conversation, she hung up and returned to the car. Friend of mine used to work security at the station, she said. He'll get us a maintenance badge and a live feed of the cameras. We'll know before anyone else does if the locker's compromised. Why are you doing this? I asked suddenly. She blinked at me. You could have just taken the envelope, run the story, and been done, I said. But you're here, driving me through the middle of nowhere at 4 in the morning. Why? Caroline's hands tightened on the wheel. Because I've seen what happens when people try to whistleblow on things like this. They get buried sometimes literally. And because she hesitated. Because you're in this because of a billboard. Not money, not revenge, just truth. People like you are rare. I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. We reached the edge of the city by dawn. Union Station rose ahead, all glass and stone, its clock tower pale against the morning sky. Commuters streamed in and out like ants. From a distance it looked ordinary, even safe. But my stomach twisted at the thought of that locker somewhere inside, a bomb of information waiting to go off. Carolyn parked in a lot 3 blocks away. She handed me a disposable coffee cup and a badge with a laminated photo of someone who looked vaguely like me. Maintenance contractor. Walk like you belong. Where will you be? In the control room, she said. Friend owes me a favor. I'll be watching the cameras. If anyone follows you, I'll text the burner. I swallowed hard. And if they move before I get out? Caroline's eyes met mine. Then you run. Drop the bag. Run. Don't be a hero. I slipped the badge on, tucking my hair under a cap. The city air smelled like diesel and coffee. My heart hammered as I walked toward the station's doors, blending with the crowd. Inside, the cavernous hall buzzed with voices and the echo of rolling luggage. Overhead, a board clicked with arrival times. Somewhere under my feet, the maintenance stairwell waited along with the key Melissa had hidden. Every step felt like a countdown. I reached the stairwell door. It was unmarked, just a narrow grey metal slab. No one glanced twice as I pushed it open and slipped inside. The noise of the station muffled instantly. The stairwell smelled of concrete and oil, dimly lit, pipes running along the ceiling. My footsteps echoed as I descended. 3rd rail, she'd said. I crouched by the landing, heart pounding, running my hand along the cold metal edge. For a second I thought it was gone, then my fingers brushed tape. I peeled it back. A small brass locker key fell into my palm. The burner buzzed in my pocket. Carolyn, asterisk to men, just entered the stairwell above you. Black coat. Not staff. Move. Asterisk, my breath caught. I closed my fist around the key, scanning the dim stairwell. Footsteps echoed above. The men were coming down. And the locker was still waiting. The stairwell suddenly felt narrower, the concrete walls pressing in. Their footsteps were steady, unhurried, like men who already knew their prey was cornered. Caroline's text buzzed again. Asterisk, don't go back up. Trop risky. Use service tunnel on 2nd landing. Now, asterisk, I scanned the landing below me and spotted it's an old steel door. Half hidden behind a mop bucket, no handle, just a rusted push bar. I bolted. My shoes slapped the concrete, the sound too loud in the stairwell. The men above quickened their pace. One of them called out, voice sharp, echoing, "Stop, now." I didn't. I shoved through the service door and stumbled into darkness. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of oil and electricity, a maintenance tunnel. Narrow pipes ran along the ceiling, and a faint hum vibrated through the floor. The door slammed open behind me. Flashlight beams cut through the dark, bouncing along the walls. I ran. The tunnel twisted left, then right, my lungs burning. My hand clutched the key so tightly the grooves dug into my skin. If I dropped it, this was all, for nothing. Behind me, the men's footsteps pounded closer. One shouted, "You can't run forever." I didn't answer. Tanada Junction to a bunk shed, my zapets heated left or right. The burner buzzed in my pocket. I yanked it out mid-run. Caroline's text glowed across the screen. Asterisk left. Locker row is to levels down. Keep moving. Asterisk, I veered left. The floor sloped downward, the hum of the station above dimming. The tunnel ended at another door. Tian marqué de astra et oysters, I slammed the bar and burst into a narrow corridor lined with electrical panels. Through a grimy window at the end, I glimpsed them, the lockers. A long row of grey steel doors, commuters walking casually past, oblivious. I was almost there. But when I pushed into the locker hole, I froze. 2 more men stood at the far end, scanning the numbers on the lockers. Black coats. Sunglasses indoors. They were looking for it too. My throat went dry. I couldn't just walk up to 317, now it would be suicide. I ducked behind a vending machine, heart slamming against my ribs. Carolyn S. voice buzzed in my ear through the cheap burner earpiece she'd given me before I left the car. I see them. Don't approach. They're watching the row. You'll need a distraction. I whispered back, what kind of distraction? There was a pause. Then, the fire alarm. Before I could argue, klaxons blared overhead, red strobes flashing against the walls. Startled, shouts erupted as commuters grabbed bags and rushed for the exits. The two men tensed, glancing at each other. Then, reluctantly, they moved with the crowd. I darted from behind the vending machine, weaving through the chaos. My hands shook as I found the number 317. The key slid in. The lock turned with a metallic click. Inside was a small, battered duffel bag. I yanked it out, shoved it under my jacket, and merged with the panicked crowd streaming toward the platforms. My ears roared with the alarm, my pulse nearly matching its rhythm. Caroline's voice hissed in my ear. Good, you've got it. Now get out, south exit. I'll meet you at the car. But even as I pushed toward the exit, I caught sight of them again, the men, in black coats. Scanning the crowd, their faces set like stone, and one of them looked straight at me. I clutched the duffel tighter and pushed harder through the mob, knowing I had seconds before the chase began. And whatever was inside that bag was the reason they wouldn't stop. The crowd poured out of Union Station, like water, from a breached dam commuters shoving toward the exits. Red strobe, lights flashing across terrified faces. I kept my head down, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, the duffel wedged under my coat. My heartbeat was louder than the alarm. Caroline's voice hissed through the earpiece again. Greater than south exit. Keep moving. I've got eyes on the SUV. It's circling the block. They're looking for you. The man in the black coat was no longer scanning. Ewa moving fasting. Across the people. Fly people like a hawk. The second man followed, hand pressed to his ear, murmuring into an unseen mic. I ducked behind a pillar, heart hammering, and shoved my way toward the stairwell, to the lower concourse instead of the exit. The concrete steps felt slick under my shoes. A push from behind nearly sent me tumbling. I caught the railing, glancing back just in time to see the first man break through the crowd, his coat flaring. Caroline's voice. Greater than you're heading to the lower concourse. There's a service door at the far end. I can open it from the control room, but you've got maybe 30 seconds before they're on you. I'm trying. I hissed, sprinting down the last steps. The concourse was mostly empty, echoing and cold. A single maintenance worker froze as I burst out, then vanished behind a cart. My lungs burned, every muscle screaming. Ahead, a metal door with a glowing green exit light flickered. Caroline's voice rose. Greater than that's it. Far door on the left. It'll lead to the loading docks. Run! I sprinted. My boots skidded on the concrete. The duffel thumped against my ribs. Behind me, footsteps pounded closer. Closer. I slammed against the door. Locked. Then it clicked open. I burst into a long, dim corridor, smelling of diesel and cold air. Lights slashed in from the open, loading bay at the far end, where delivery trucks idled. I bolted for it. My breath came in ragged gasps. The duffel, strap cutting into my shoulder. A shout behind me. Stop. I didn't. I barreled out into the cold dawn air, the loading bay opening onto a narrow service street behind the station. Caroline's Subaru screeched to a stop across the alley, door already open. Get in, she shouted. I sprinted the last few feet and dove into the passenger seat. Caroline slammed the car into reverse as one of the men burst through the bay door, gun drawn but lowered at the ground to avoid attention. Wepiledao, tires, my chest heaved. The duffel sat in my lap like a live grenade. Caroline's knuckles were white on the wheel. You got it. I nodded, too breathless to speak. Oh, because from the way they were moving, she said, glancing in the mirror at the shrinking figures behind us. They'll tear this city apart to get it back. I unzipped the duffel, just enough to peek inside. A stack of flash drives. A leather-bound notebook. And an envelope marked only with a single word. Asterisk, asterisk, insurance. Asterisk, asterisk, my stomach clenched. What's in here? Caroline's eyes stayed on the road. If Melissa's right, it's the rest of the map. Names, accounts, instructions. The kind of thing people kill to keep buried. I zipped it shut. Then we can't get them out. Caroline say, we dictable. We need somewhere off the grid. Somewhere no one's looking. The city faded in the rearview mirror as we headed into open highway. The sky ahead was pale, the horizon stretching wide and empty. Where are we going? I asked finally. Carolyn took a long breath. To the only person I know who can keep us alive long enough to publish this. Who? She glanced at me, the faintest flicker of a smile on her lips. Someone who owes me a favor. And if they're still willing, by the time we're done, the people chasing you will wish the billboard had been the only thing you ever did. I tightened my grip on the duffel as the car sped toward the horizon. Knowing the story had started with a wedding, but was now spiraling into something far bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. The Subaru ate up miles of cracked asphalt as Carolyn drove us deeper into the countryside, the city lights shrinking to a dull glow behind us. Dawn bled into morning, painting the sky a pale grey. I kept my hand clamped on the duffel, its weight pressing into my lap like an anchor. Finally, Carolyn spoke. We're heading to an old farm about 40 minutes from here. Guy named Walker. Used to be investigative press before. He pissed off the wrong people. Live's quiet now. No phone. No internet. But he's still got contacts, and he knows how to keep people off the radar. Walker. I asked, the name unfamiliar. You'll see, Carolyn muttered. Just don't expect friendly. He doesn't trust anyone. No événement. The road narrowed, lined with skeletal trees. A faded wooden sign warned, * private property, trespassers will be shot. * Carolyn didn't slow. She pulled up to a rusted gate, honked once, then twice in quick succession. For a moment, nothing. Then the gate creaked open on its own. We rolled up a gravel driveway to a farmhouse that had seen better centuries. Curtains drawn, paint peeling. A barn leaning under its own weight. And on the porch, a tall man with a rifle slung across his shoulder. His hair was silver, his eyes sharp as glass. Carolyn cut the engine. Don't reach for anything, she said quietly. Not even your water bottle. The man descended the porch steps, boots crunching gravel. He stopped by her window, rapped the barrel of the rifle against the glass. You've got guts, showing up here. Carolyn. His voice was gravelly, suspicious. His gaze flicked to me. And you brought company. Carolyn rolled down the window. This is the one I told you about. Walker's eyes narrowed. The Billboard kid. My stomach flipped. Kid, I muttered, but I didn't move. Walker stared a moment longer, then opened the door himself. J'incide. Both of you. Now, we followed him into the farmhouse. Inside smelled of wood smoke and dust, but it was surprisingly orderly. Stacks of newspapers, maps pinned to walls, shelves lined with old radios and battered file boxes. Walker set the rifle against the wall and crossed his arms. You're either stupid brave, probably but what the hell is in that bag? I unzipped the duffel and slid the contents onto his table, the flash drives. The leather notebook, the envelope marked * insurance, * Walker's eyes sharpened. He reached for the notebook, flipping through pages scrawled with account numbers, initials, coded transfers. His jaw tightened. Jesus Christ, he muttered. You don't even know what you've got here, do you? I swallowed hard. Melissa said it was enough to bring them all down. Walker slammed the notebook shut. She's not wrong. But it's also enough to get you killed 10 times over. These aren't just scams and shell companies. This ties into people you don't say out loud. Judges, politicians, maybe even higher. Carolyn frowned. Then we publish. Expose it all before they can bury it. Walker's laugh was humorless. Publish. You think they'll let this hit daylight? They'll shut down every outlet before the ink's dry. And you, he jabbed a finger at me. They'll make you disappear, so clean your own. Shadow won't remember you. A silence stretched, broken only by the tick of an old clock on the wall. Finally, Walker leaned back, folding his arms. There's one option, but you won't like it. My voice was hoarse. What is it? He pointed at the envelope, marked * insurance. * if Melissa labeled it that, then inside is her bargaining chip. The one thing they're more afraid of losing the money. I stared at it, throat tight, and if we open it, Walker's expression darkened. Then there's no going back. Once you know what's in there, you're part of the war. And wars don't end clean. Carolyn reached for the envelope, but stopped, her hand trembling over it. She looked at me. It's your call, she said. This started with you. The envelope sat between us on the table, thin and silent, as if daring me to tear it open. And I realized, for the first time since the Billboard, That my choice could change everything, not just for me, but for everyone tied to the names inside. My hand moved toward it. The paper rasped beneath my fingertips as I lifted the envelope. For a moment, I just stared at it plain, ordinary, sealed with cheap glue. But the weight in the room was suffocating, like the three of us knew that once I tore it open, nothing could be undone. Carolyn whispered, "You don't have to," but I did. I slid a finger under the flap and ripped. Inside were a handful of photographs, creased and grainy. Not money, not ledgers, not bank slips faces, men in suits, shaking hands. A woman in a governor's sash. Another photo of a man I recognized immediately, one of the guests from Melissa's wedding. Smiling, glass of champagne in hand, he'd hugged me that night. He'd joked about my shoes. I felt sick. Beneath the photos was a single-page document. Typed, official, bearing the letterhead of a political campaign committee. At first it looked like any donation. Record until I saw the amounts. Millions. Funneled through shell companies I recognized from the notebook, all tied directly to the names in those photographs. Walker cursed under his breath. He took the page, his hand steady, but his jaw clenched. It's worse than I thought. This isn't laundering. For rich crooks, it's laundering for power. They're buying elections with stolen money. Caroline's face paled. If this gets out... Walker shook his head. If this gets out without a plan, you're dead before the ink hits paper. These people control cops, judges, networks. You think a journalist's firewall keeps you safe? No, you'll vanish, and so will every copy. I stared at the photos again, bile rising in my throat. Melissa had been at the edge of this the whole time, smiling, laughing, playing maid of honor to something monstrous. And she'd handed me the match for the powder keg. Carolyn leaned forward, her voice tight. Then what's the move? Walker studied us both, then the envelope, then back again. Finally, he said, we make them eat each other. Leak pieces, not the whole thing. Enough to stir paranoia. Enough that they turn on each other before they even know what's gone, missing. That's the only way this survives daylight. Carolyn frowned. Controlled leaks. To who? Walker's lips curled in a humorless smile. To the ones who hate them just as much. Rivals, enemies, people with reach who'd love to watch them burn. The clock ticked in the silence that followed. Maisted, Mima Hasing. Carolyn finally said, and in the meantime, what about him? She nodded at me. Walker's gaze locked on mine, unblinking. He needs to disappear. Now. Before they realize that locker's empty. Before they realize who Melissa trusted. I swallowed hard. Disappear where? Walker's smile was cold. Somewhere, even they won't look. Off the grid. No trace. If you want to survive long enough to see this through, you don't exist anymore. The photos on the table seemed to stare back at me, those smug faces immortalized in cheap ink. Melissa had passed me her last card, and now I held something people would kill whole families to bury. I realized, with a chill that sank to my bones, that the Billboard had been the easy part. The war was just beginning. The truth never ends the way stories do, in books or movies. There's no single slam of a gavel that makes everything right. No billboard bright enough to erase all the damage. Melissa went to prison, and Greg will likely never see daylight without bars again. Their names will be remembered as cautionary tales, not as bride and groom. Carolyn published her pieces in fragments, carving out dents in the armor of a system far larger than any of us. Walker went back to his silence, watching from the edges. And me? I became a shadow, with a name that wasn't mine, living in a place that didn't ask questions. The world believes the Billboard girl disappeared, had job done. Maybe that's true. Maybe disappearing is the closest thing to freedom you can find after staring too long at the machinery behind power. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, I think back to that wedding day, the gasps. The stares, the glow of neon, spelling out asterisk scammers asterisk in letters 30 feet tall. I remember the sick twist in my stomach when I first opened Melissa's laptop. The surge of fury when her card told me I was no longer welcome, and the moment I chose not silence, but exposure. That choice, reckless as it was, pulled threads I could never tie back together. It destroyed lives. It saved others. It reshaped mine forever. If there is a conclusion, it's this: truth is never neat, and justice is never clean. It's jagged and heavy, a blade that cuts in every direction. Sometimes it makes enemies. Sometimes it makes ghosts. But when the lies are big enough and the stakes high enough, shining that truth is still worth it. The billboard came down. The scandal became yesterday's news. But the glow of that night lives on in memory, in whispers. In the quiet knowledge that one act of defiance can light up a darkness far bigger than itself. That was my war. That was my ending. And even if Anamlaza Kerrawera made it count.